Thanks for stopping by. Today I've got an interview with Jan Roberts and there's lots of valuable information for you, so stay around to pick up the tips for why gut health is important for your hormones and how it's going to help you ride better through menopause. It's high value, dense content, so do stay to the end. There's a lot of really good information from 10 minutes on, but if you can stay the distance, you'll find out valuable tips for you to feel better every day as you move into menopause and beyond. All the best, look forward to seeing more of you in the future. Hi there, Dr. Brian here with the Honourable Jan. So Jan's a published author and an advocate of women's health at both ends of the reproductive life, so from preconception care and birth, and then particularly at the end of reproductive life into menopause. So Jan's written a number of blogs, and this third blog we're talking about is restoring the microbiome. So Jan, what does that mean, and what's wrong with the microbiome that it needs restoring?
First of all, we'll talk about exactly what it is, because it's a word that you'll see more and more of. The studies now are, just massively increasing in number. Microbiome is the whole of the bacterial, mostly bacterial population that inhabits you. So inside and outside. There are bacteria on your skin, in your ears, in your mouth, in your nose, in your vagina, and of course in your gastrointestinal tract, which is where the majority of those bacteria reside. And we believe there's actually more bacteria on and in us than human cells. So the statistics vary, but the one I think is most reliable is from University of California, San Diego, where they are doing some of the major microbiome research. And they suggest we have 30 trillion human cells and 39 trillion bacterial cells. So we're only about 43% human, Brian.
Well, I think what I understand in terms of the microbiome, it actually maintains the integrity of the tissue quite a bit. So one of the signs of breakdown of microbiome would be overwashing the hands and the skin breaks down. So you can see that if that happened internally, you get a breakdown of the gut wall.
Absolutely, and we have an epidemic of gut wall issues. And microbiome is very, very much involved in maintaining, restoring, repairing and maintaining the integrity of the gastrointestinal tract. And when the numbers of those bacteria, or the diversity, so we're not just wanting a lot of them, we want a lot of different strains and species in our guts. And the evidence is that over the last 60, 70 years, and we'll talk about why that period is particularly important, the diversity in the gut has decreased by about a third. So what we would see, for example, in an African population eating a traditional diet, living out, away from the sort of cities, would be vastly different from what we might see in an urban population in Australia, for example.
Now, I heard something very interesting the other day, that one of the key determinants of the quality of the gut is the quality of the air we breathe.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
So when the air is more sanitised and purified, and we live indoors with air conditioning and air filters, we actually reduce the diversity of the gut flora because of the role of the nose, the lungs, the oxygenation of the blood, and then the blood transporting. And then there's the idea that the gut flora diversity is a lock and key relationship with the foods we eat.
Yes.
So if we eat quite a narrow band of foods and high processed foods, there's nothing to feed the gut flora.
There's no prebiotic.
Yes, correct. Yeah. So what do we? So I with that in mind, there's probably a few things that link as to what it has to do with menopause and
yes. Well, that's what I was just going to say. Let's go back there, because as well as maintaining the integrity of the gut lining. And this is where people are unaware of just the massive importance of this whole part of us. So, energy metabolism is one I like to put top of the list, because this is how we manage our weight. And if your gut health is compromised, you can cut out food intake, you can exercise till you are dropping. And if your gut health is not restored, you will struggle to lose weight. So that's a biggie.
Yes, I've read information on that previously. Yes.
Yeah.
So good gut support makes a big difference to weight loss.
Yeah. Immunity. It's a biggie right now, Brian.
Yes, yeah.
85% of our immune response is mediated through our gut. 85%.
Well, because that was that interesting piece of information that I've alluded to a few times when we were at university, and they said it's not inside your body until it's through the gut wall. And I always imagined once you'd closed your mouth and it was dark, it was inside your body, but actually it's considered outside. Like the tube from mouth to rectum is actually a hose that's all outside the body until it's through the gut wall. So the gut wall is the interface between inside and outside, so it has to be next to intact skin, the major defence against pathogens.
There you go. Well, there you are.
Isn't that cool?
Isn't
So
it
it makes
cool?
sense, doesn't it?
Yes. And to your point of what it's got to do with hormones and menopause and so on, the microbiome's also largely involved in supporting the health of what we call a hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, which is how all of our hormones interact: thyroid, progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, and so on. Again, restoring gut health is going to make a big difference to how well your body is supported to make its own hormones.
Sure, yeah. And it needs the molecular substrates for that, doesn't it?
Yes.
So you know, cholesterol is actually the underlying molecule for all of the
Certainly is.
hormones.
Yes.
So if we keep cholesterol down artificially,
Yeah.
then we actually potentially reduce the capacity to make the hormones we need for health.
Because the substrate's not
The
there.
substrate's not there, and you know there's a whole lot of issues around, let's say, obesity that actually further complicate the matter, because now the body's not working in a normal frame, and so the role of cholesterol, vitamin D. Something I learned the other day that's awesome
Tell me.
and interesting is that vitamin D in obesity doesn't ever get to where it goes, because the vitamin D goes directly into fat tissue.
I was going to say it goes into fat.
So it actually doesn't then, it's not available to actually nourish the healthy active cells in the body and support immunity and transport things like sulfate to the pineal gland, so that you can release melatonin when the lights go out and you go to sleep.
Oh, so this is...
So everything is magnificently, you can't take the string section out of the orchestra and hope it sounds the same.
No, Brian, you cannot. Which is why the company I work for is such an interesting name. It's called Symphony, which is
Right,
about
yes,
exactly
yes,
this.
yeah,
So
yeah.
putting it all together. So let's just go back to the other final thing of the microbiome. It is involved in the manufacture of vitamins in your gut.
Mm-hmm.
So it's massively important. And we have a holy trinity of compromising factors. Shall we just run through those so people understand?
It's a Sunday, so let's do a Holy Trinity.
Yes, well, there's more than a trinity actually. So if we start where the health of the microbiome is actually established in utero, we know that now.
Yes.
We thought it was starting when the baby made its journey down the birth canal, which is indeed vitally important in inoculating that new infant with the mother's bacterial
Sure.
population.
Yeah.
Baby born by caesarean, of course, misses out on that, particularly an elective caesarean. Baby not breastfed misses out on the bacteria in the breast milk, which are quite unique to breast milk. Then Brian's already mentioned modern diets, no fibre, no food for the good bacteria to live on. We've got refined, processed. The agricultural chemicals also have a profound negative impact on the microbiome. Roundup in particular destroys the bacteria in the soil and within our bodies, and of course that's the most widely used weed killer in the world. Great reason for eating organic. And then chlorine in the water, another contributor. You know, the list is very long. Interestingly, hormonal birth control also adversely affects the bacterial population within us. There's not
much
it's more than a
chance,
holy
really,
trinity.
It's quite remarkable that we survive, and I guess it always
is.
goes back to the sort of extraordinary imperative of the physiology to survive and reproduce against the odds, nearly.
Oh, definitely against
Yeah,
the
yeah,
odds. Yes, indeed.
So is there a course of action?
Oh,
These
we're going to
beautiful
talk about that.
people
There
on the
is,
other side of
and
the camera?
it's not that difficult, really.
Mm.
As long as you know why you're doing it and what benefits are going to accrue. Clearly, as I just mentioned, organic has a big role in this. So get rid of the cocktail of chemicals which are negatively impacting your microbiome. Oh, one thing, sorry, I mentioned the biggie, and why I said 60 or 70 years ago, our gut bacteria was a very different thing. The rise and rise of antibiotic therapy for all manner of things. Now widely recognised not to be appropriate, but the damage is done.
Well, I think what I've heard previously is that because the mother offers her diversity, and then that mother offers it to her, so now it's got probably 4 generations of women whose mother had antibiotics prior to them being born, and so therefore if each time you reduce it 20 or 30% as a result of that, depending on the frequency and the recency, you've actually got a reason why the microbiome of the current generation of children is quite narrow relative to our grandparents.
Yeah, no, the transgenerational effects are dramatic, as Brian's just explained. Across generations, it is compromised every time there's a new generation.
Yes.
And now we've got this epidemic of kids with metabolic, immune, neurological, digestive disorders, all linked to this very profound change to the microbiome. So what to do? So organic. Antibiotics, avoid wherever possible. Look to other ways to enhance your immunity. We can talk about that on another day, perhaps.
Yes. Totally.
Get the food into your gut for the bacteria, which means lots of fibre, lots of vegetables, fruits. Get rid of anything that we find. Whole grains. The ancient grains are very good because they're less hybridised. They're much healthier in terms of providing food for the bacteria that you're hoping to nurture. I like to add, if you're going to take probiotics, look out for one that's got multiple strains, high potency. Things like yogurt are not sufficiently potent to restore the optimal health of the microbiome. But that said, I do like adding fermented foods to the diet, and
they're very important.
The things like the sauerkrauts of the world. There's a fabulous variety now, and then little boutique producers. You can buy them at the produce markets, farmers markets up here in the mountains. We've got a marvellous selection when the markets open up.
And you can just buy a good quality Polish sauerkraut because they've been making it for generations.
They have
assuming
indeed.
It's good.
That's a very interesting point. I just want to mention that. If you look back in history, you will see that almost every society across history has used fermented foods on a daily basis.
Yes. I have an interesting hypothesis where I'm just going to flag, so
I'm
going to come back to that. So the fermented foods are about preserving summer foods for winter quite often. So do they have some secret effect of boosting vitamin D in winter in climates that are frozen? So if you go to northern Europe and up into the Arctic Circle, well, not Arctic, let's say Russia, top of China, all that region which is just frozen for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And the people actually thrive and survive, and they're not getting out in the sun. When they're outdoors, they're totally wrapped up, yet they're actually doing okay. So is there something that the fermented foods, particularly that sort of crucifix class, because it's usually cabbage or something, does that do something in helping the body to cope with no vitamin D? And it could be to do with the microbiome and then how that substitutes something. I think that's quite fascinating.
I love the way your brain goes. These are very clever.
And maybe maybe what it does is you actually release the vitamin D from stored body fat.
Well, that is possible, because I was going to say what those societies probably have during the summer, during the very long summer months, been outside or working in the fields, they would have the vitamin D status of what is ideal, interesting, which is the lifeguard scenario. The lifeguard who's been sitting on his tower for the whole summer that is the vitamin D status that we all would aspire to, and I do believe that would carry you through a winter. I mean, but whether or not the fermented foods have a role, I expect they have many more benefits than we are currently aware of.
Well, something I read too, we're up to 15 minutes in a minute, is that in a classical sort of non-stored food, out of season sort of food availability, you'd actually put body fat on over summer, eating fruit and all those foods.
Right.
You and then in winter you actually consume you access that store of body fat when food is scarce, and that will be a way that the body would then release vitamin D out of the stored body fat.
Makes
That's
sense.
I've come up with that idea as I'm talking to you, but I kind of think that makes sense when you put it all together. So I guess the takeaway is eat clean food, do get in the sun and get outdoor and breathe fresh air. Do the things that your grandparents, well our grandparents, so your great-grandparents quite likely did as a course of their normal day. And, meditate, sit upright, just do all the things that we are inclined not to do, you could say.
And may I suggest not stressing, which
right now is sort of like asking you not to breathe. It's very, very difficult. But there's always ways, and on my next blog is about being happy and joyful, there's always things we can look to and focus on that actually provide that relief. So whether it's thinking about your grandchildren, or digging in the garden, or walking the dog, or there is something for each of us that when we think about it or do it, you find a smile on your face. So just do more of that and less of the other. And that will be
and one more
powerful.
thing, we didn't say purified water. Get rid
purified
of chlorine from your water.
Chlorine is quite good to get the water to the house without killing you. But
it's important to get it to the house.
Let's just say that once it comes out of the tap, you don't want to drink that water.
That's right.
So, I mean, there's a whole argument of whether we need to chlorinate the water anyway, but that's for another day. But let's assume that it's necessary to keep it safe for consumption. There are many ways that you can reduce the chlorine before you drink it.
Correct. We can talk about that.
And boiling it could be super easy because chlorine is dissipated immediately with heat. Anybody with a spa pool will know you have to overdose the spa pool to keep the chlorine levels up because the heat dissipates it. So you could just boil the water if you didn't have a filter. That would be quite effective.
Yes, we'll talk about that on another day.
We will indeed. Thanks, Jan. I really appreciate your help, and I do hope that you stay to the end to hear the gems. We're going to put the gems in the description, so you stay. Thank you very much. Join the group, click on the link to become part of the Hands-On Tribe via the Daily Apple, and there'll be a link to Jan's resources where you can get some of the products she's talking about from Symphony and access her information through her own website. Because she is a mine of information and has published a number of books which are at the beginning end of your reproductive life with children in the future, learning how to clean the oven to create bake a good cake. Is actually super important. You can't create a newborn any better than the ingredients going into the cake, and how the environment of the woman's reproductive system, as well as the health of the man, will be manifest in the health of the child. So there's no better investment than your children.
Summed it up. Thank you, Brian. Thank you for that endorsement, and look forward to our next interview.
Struth, mate, Struth.
Yes.
Happy Father's Day to anybody on this particular Sunday, because there's a man involved in all of these relationships, so let's praise them for all they do.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. All the best.